Hello, it's a pleasure to be here. I must apologise to Durham Union for coming late earlier on. I was delayed trying to convince David Cameron and Theresa May that George Orwell's book 1984 was a work of fiction and not a guidebook to practical political politics. Failed. It's been wonderful speeches from the other side about patriotism, about being moral, but that's the point. They haven't really argued for patriotism, they just argued for being moral and morality. And I'd argue that morality here is more important than patriotism. In fact, patriotism doesn't really give any morals. Morality gives morals. Anywhere in this world that you live, you should be a good person to your neighbours, to the weak, to the elderly, to the poor, to each other, irrespective of whether or not you are a citizen of that country. That's being called common human decency. And I think my argument, and the argument of my esteemed colleague Peter, is that humanity and morality have no borders, but patriotism does. And therein lies the problem. So what is patriotism? We talk about it. What does it mean? Well, I'd like to proffer just one potential definition. It's support of one's country above others. Because if you don't put your country above others, then you're not a patriot, you're just an internationalist, or you're a person who is cosmopolitan. So in order to be a patriot, you have to put your country above others. And people say, well, isn't patriotism just simply loving one's country, or loving the country that you happen to reside in, or one that you call your home? Well, no. When you go abroad, you might fall in love with other countries. Could you then be described as a patriot of other countries? I dare say, according to that definition, there might be many people here who are patriots of Ibiza, Bangkok, and Las Vegas. Remember, what happens in Las Vegas stays there. So, that's absurd. What about patriotism being gratitude for your country for raising you and giving you things? Well, actually, that wasn't really your country. That was your mum and dad. That was your parents, your people around you, humans of society giving you what you needed to develop yourself and educate yourself and feed yourself. I mean, the land doesn't actually physically give you anything unless you are farmers, foragers, or King Arthur. What about, is patriotism merely pride in one's place of birth? Well, congratulations from being from a place. Congratulations on being born somewhere on Earth's crust. What about the definition of patriotism as pride in an aspect of your identity? But if that's so, at best it's egotistical, and at worst it's conceited. Because if you are saying, well, this is something of my identity, so I'm proud of it, I could argue, just based on the argument, that, well, my identity is white and male, and I have the beard and I'm Muslim, but we also have white people as well amongst Muslims. Does it mean now that I should say I'm proud to be white, I'm proud to be male? Does that sound right to say that? It sounds quite egotistical to say that. And that's exactly what patriotism is. Because not everyone can share on that particular country's identification. And so you already are excluding people by saying, well, I'm proud of this and you're not part of this. What about you saying pride in your culture's distinctiveness or your country's distinctiveness? Well, distinctiveness in what? And isn't it quite insulting? You say, well, our country is part of British values to be proud of fair play and justice. Oh, so no other country likes fair play and justice, just Britain? Or rights, or being taking care of people, no, just Britain, or drinking tea, ironically an Indian import. I mean, you can't be proud of anything distinctive and without saying that this is only for you and no one else shares that. And that's wherein there is a conceit that lies there. But what about achievements? Well, the problem is, in all these historical achievements of one's country, you didn't do it. So then how can you claim it? And of course, if you want to say, well, whatever people did in the name of my country, I will claim it, then you also have to claim all the very nasty things done in the name of the country, which people don't seem to like to claim. What about patriotism as defined by, unfortunately, the government? The thing is, government, when it defines things like, and recently, British values, is always used to then say, and now we have to take people's rights away for the sake of getting rid of divisiveness in our country, for the sake of protecting our country from some foreign enemy. even though it happens to always be the case that our armies are always on their land halfway across the world. Strange that. And that's the problem. You see, what patriotism does, it gives politicians a means to manipulate you and to exploit you to do their bidding. Wars, killing under false claims of self-defense, governments refusing to rein back their companies and corporations which are causing global warming because it's not economically viable for their own country. Forget about the world, it's not the best policy for profits in their own country. Or going to wars in other countries for oil, such as the Iraq war. That was all done in the name of our country, and our soldiers were sent with that mantra in their hearts. People say, look at World War I, World War II, wasn't there a great movement to fight and die for your country? And interesting, because Bertrand Russell said, patriots always talk of dying for their country, but they never talk of killing for their country, because that's what it entails. And World War I was a completely unnecessary war. I mean, I think most of you are educated don't know that the Germans in World War I weren't Nazis during that point in time, and it was initially fought over something that was about limiting Russia in the Balkans. And as for World War II, people say, well, that was a righteous war because we fought against the Nazis who were killing Jews. But here's one of the dark secrets of European history that any history teacher can tell you, but it's not really well known in the wider public. In Europe, most people were anti-Semitic, including Britain. Winston Churchill and the British Parliament made no demands to Hitler to stop persecuting Jews. They said, get out of Czechoslovakia. Oh, because Britain was worried of an imbalance of power in Europe. They didn't care about the Jewish lives. They didn't tell Hitler, you stop persecuting Jews or we declare war on you. None of that. Only after the war, oh yes, sorry, it was to defend the Jews. And that is one of the horrific shames, I think, of patriotism. Whereas if they had made their foreign policy based on morality, as soon as they heard about Kristallnacht, they would have told Hitler, you stop what you're doing or we declare war. That's what they should have done. Not wait for it to actually get to such a bad point that it was too late for people to save them. And 6 million people would be alive today. Unless you're Benjamin Netanyahu, then it was just the Palestinians' fault, apparently. And I think here's the interesting point. When the government intones British values, for example, recently, no one questions their right to decide what British values is. Everyone talks about, well, it's British values, can you define it, can you pin it down, and so on. They debate as to whether it's woolly or vague, but no one says, wait a second, how dare you define to us what mold we have to fit into? How dare you define to us, what values? What kind of ecumenical institution is the British government for it to define to us what is acceptable items of dogma for its religious minorities, or what is acceptable values that define you as a British person? For example, they said, oh, well, we'll believe in concepts such as democracy, for example. That's something universal. Well, there are many monarchists, many libertarians, many anarchists who disagree with that. They wouldn't be this nasty people, but they might disagree. Or some people might advocate that Britain is not actually a true democracy. Some people advocate it's not even a true secular country. Though they will be threatened with silence, all because the government has invoked British values, and everyone must conform to British values as defined by them. And no one questions, wait a second, who the hell are you to define this? And this is the problem. George Bernard Shaw said, you'll never have a quiet world until you knock patriotism out of the human race. And I think he has a point to mention there. And I think that everything that being a good human being is can be derived from morality, not from your nation. If you say that I'm a moral person only because I come from X, Y, and Z nation, then you are basically inferring that everyone else who's not part of that nation is not moral. And of course, just to show you some of the absurdities of nationalism, Theresa May, the Home Secretary, under the royal prerogative, has taken people's passports and citizenship away. Which means that you could be a proud Brit, but because she signs a piece of paper, you would no longer be British. Theresa May giveth, and the Theresa May taketh away. Now, does that mean that you'd have to give up liking tea and watching Doctor Who because she signed a piece of paper? Not that you have to watch those things to be British, and that's the point. Is that this is how absurd it is. This is how silly it is. People draw lines on the map. My colleague said that the Middle East, all that chaos was caused by a misunderstanding of patriotism on behalf of the British Empire. I'd say the opposite. It was the insertion of patriotism on behalf of the British Empire. Suddenly people who lived in the Levant called themselves Syrians and divided themselves up from Jordans and from Palestinians and from Lebanese, even though they speak the same language, dialect, and mostly have the same religion, although there are Christians there for centuries that have coexisted, and there are Yazidis and many others coexisted for centuries, I might add, under Islamic government. Their churches not destroyed, their temples not taken down. Some of the oldest churches in the world perfectly preserved in the Middle East, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that tolerance, acceptance that the Muslim world was showing to people of different faiths and beliefs. But that all ended the day the British government came into the Middle East, uninvited, of course. They like to go into the Middle East. Apparently, it's a famous pastime. Britain has invaded Iraq 6 times in the last 100 years. It's gone in for so many times. It should get a reward card. And it came in, and suddenly, after these nationalistic or patriotic governments were put in place, you had so many infighting, coups, killings, massacres, as everyone fights to define what are the patriotic values of their country. Will it be, what are the patriotic values of to be an Iraqi, or to be a Syrian, or to be a Jordanian? And suddenly, it means that you have to adopt one particular group's or faction's viewpoint, whereas beforehand they never had this jostling to impose one faction or the other's viewpoint into dictating the future of their state. But that all started the moment you created those governments. India as well. India, Hindus and Muslims and Sikhs lived peacefully for centuries on a community level. No problems. As soon as you have Indian patriotism was inserted, and then there's all this factional fighting as to who defines Indian patriotism. There's now the Hinduta party, which is coming up and is imposing itself on other minorities and saying that you now have to abide by our rules. And recently they said that you can't eat beef in certain states. It's actually a law in India now. You can't eat beef in certain states of India. And of course there was mob violence against people who were eating beef in derogation of the Indian values as defined by this one faction. And that's the problem. As soon as you have patriotism, you have a power struggle by multiple factions to define what is the character of that country. And once they've defined it, then everyone must conform to it. Much like our current Tory party. So I would say this. I believe we're one big human family. And yes, we might have different beliefs, and we might have different ideas. But the very most basic and common denominator is that we are all human beings. And in Islam we have this concept called Bani Adam, the tribe of Adam, that we are all from the tribe of Adam, who we believe to be the first man. You don't need to believe that, but you can at least agree that we are all human beings. And so I would say that under this concept, morality has no borders. And wherever you happen to be placed in this world, do good in your society, do good to your community, do good to the weak and the poor that need your help, and strive to be a better human being, and strive to make everyone around you a better human being. Now I ask a simple question: how does patriotism improve upon that? How does it improve upon it? It doesn't. And so I say this: patriotism adds nothing to morality, nor incites anything good that morality doesn't already do or have. And yet, in the name of patriotism, great acts of immorality have been justified. So in conclusion, I ask you this: show me what action patriotism gives that morality doesn't, and I will show you the morality it takes away by its actions. Thank you.